Okay. So we are looking at the profile page and the question is, how do we get connection requests to the side? One thing I really want to point out here, and I see, and the reason I want to point it out is because I've seen a couple students do this. So I want to make sure that when we are dealing with moving elements, oftentimes our first thought is to check our CSS.
Oh, I know this one. Can I help out?
Go ahead.
Awesome. So when we're doing that, and first you're gonna set like a column one and column two. With this one, it'd probably be in the like the HTML column two or column one. When we're first setting it up, we'd like change it. Hold on, sorry, get a card. So what we're wrong is where you have class one. How you set that up is off. Let me pull that to verify because I was having that same issue and then it hit me. I had it on the wrong side. Oh, a moment. Feel like I got that. So profile pics. Yeah, so it's with the HTML. It is a placement.
So let's even before we move into that, Marvin, because I'm with you. Let's just think through our HTML real fast, right? Let's just kind of break this down and kind of the Lego big piece, and then let's go piece by piece.
Cool.
So we've got this container. One secret that you can always check, and I promise you guys, it seems so simple, but always use this, is you can see these lines where the div, and it's showing you where its closing element is. So we see that if you go up to container, let's follow this line.
You're missing a div.
Let's follow that line for container. And we see that it ends, well, I guess you can keep going. Let's look. Keep going.
Line 55 should be like a line 56.
So yeah, these lines keep going all the way to the very bottom. Right? Okay, so this is where it ends. Okay, cool. So I can't remember if it's this one or this one of those two, right? And what we want to do is, the reason I point that out is because sometimes when we are dealing with positioning, sure, when we're dealing with flex, that's a CSS thing. But CSS is only what we can make it look like, but we can't change the structure of how our web page is set up. Similar to a house, right? If we've got a staircase and it's got like a normal staircase that's maybe got like a little, think of it like a Harry Potter staircase, right? Where it's got a little room under. I can't with CSS, if my entire like wooden architecture is that it's got a little room under and it's got a little storage space, I can't then make it look like I've got floating stairs, right? Because the foundation is different. So let's make sure that when we're dealing with this, I think I've seen a few students, so that's why I wanted to point it out, is that the CSS can allow you to manipulate and put things side by side, but we first have to check, does our structure of our house, does our structure of our code allow for the side to side? And so what I would think, just we haven't dove into this code, I would think is that there is a div parent issue. Either this is too long, and remember that if this is too long and the container itself or whatever the parent element is not big enough, right? Then it'll always go here. So if this is 500 pixels and this entire container is 700 and this is 300, right? There's going to be an issue. 500 plus 300 is 800. So it's too big. So it's always going to kick it down. So we first want to make sure, and this is what I would say, especially when you're doing your exam, start with the basics, start with the structure of the house. Is our divs and everything set up correctly to where they should be able to be side by side? Is it a sibling to like in its entirety, whether what its parent is its parent a sibling to the parent of the Jane Doe one, or is it a sibling to Jane Doe? That's what I would say, if that makes sense.
And
So
my
let's look at-
divs might be messed up because I was moving stuff around.
that would be my first, I mean, that would be my guess, is that you've got quite a few divs that maybe, and it's the hard thing, and this is why I wanted to point out this line, is because if you just have one extra closing div, even if it's formatted differently, then it's going to like automatically close it, right? Because format is just the way we read it. A computer, you could have everything on one line. It would be this most disgusting thing I've ever seen. But in theory, you could have everything on one line and it'll still read it like normal.
I mean, I think it's line 56. Like
So
right under there.
what I always do, and this is right click the element, or just not element, sorry, just the page. Right click any page. Or just like, yep, and then go format document. Right here. Perfect. And then let's do, okay. Let's go to prettier. Yep. Click that. Okay. Now this is formatted, and this is how I would always start if I'm trying to break down stuff, because it allows me to see where things are closed. Now this like H3 image, all that. Yes, that's ugly. This red, but it at least allows me to, it puts the parents and the divs, and the siblings, and it kind of gives a little bit more structure. So if you do have an extra closing div tag or opening div tag, this allows you to know that. Okay. So we've got, let's look at our code. We have this Jane Doe card body. Okay. Where's that end? Right here. Right here and here. Okay, so that's our card body. Is our connection request in the same div as this guy? This is a closing, this is a closing. You got a user card. It's got a div here. So you've got row. Okay. So looking at it, this user card is a sibling of this card right here. Right? Does everybody see that? Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
So we see that. Now let's scroll down to where connection costs are. Okay. So let's stop right there. We've got this card and it closes here. And it closes everything. And then this div is associated with, let's go up. What's this div associated with? This call, right? So you're trying to say that you've got one column. That's what you've got currently. That's going to have your Jane Doe and this information. So I'll say CD. Perfect. Like or I'll just do education. Yes, this is office hour. Just as a reminder, always the first hour before class is office hour. So ED. Okay, perfect. Now we want to see, do we have, like, now what is our connection request? What does that live in? Okay. So that lives in another div called call. That's a card. Okay. So in theory, what is the sibling of that div right there? Just in relation to the first portion that we saw.
Wait, repeat that, please.
So what is the sibling of this div right here in the in all of this information? That's what we're trying to get it next to, right? And Josh, this is your assignment, so feel free to.
Yeah, I'm a bit confused.
Okay. You can always Command Z if it looks confusing to you. Or Control Z, I guess if you're on a Windows, and then get rid of this formatting. Will you go here for me? And will you type in beautify? What's it say? Can you click on it? Okay. Christina, do you know of another formatting than Prettier? Because Prettier sometimes looks trashy like it kind of does right now.
Well, we can try just what he has. Go to your index HTML really quick. And then right click anywhere on that page. And do format document. See if that helps. Oh, boo.
And then it gave us, it used Prettier to do this.
Ah, boo. I'll look at what extensions I have, see if anything pops out at me.
While I do that, if somebody
I think
wants
the
to-
sibling is this class row div.
Okay, great. So if that's the case, what are we wanting to do there? So if it's row, then what does that mean?
I should actually have the sibling, I should have it one div back, shouldn't I?
Yeah, so if it's even with your row, what I would say is let's confirm that. But the row is usually a div that you can use in order to put things in a row, right? And not really just, not that that class name is specified for that. It can be anything of a unicorn if you wanted. But it might make sense that if you have a div that you're wanting two big cards in, it might make sense to have a div that's not, it doesn't need to be a sibling of a row. It needs to be a sibling with like the actual card itself, right? So let's think about it from a high level. Can you go to the assignment? Okay. So we've talked about high level stuff. So let's just, as a class, for that assignment, let's build out what are our big sections that we need to do. So we got this first section.
Yeah, there's a first column and then a second one.
Sure, we've got sort of the container, right? Let's just start
Yes.
really, really large, and then we'll get a little bit more granular. Start really, really large. Cool. Then we've got maybe this guy. That's its own thing.
How about the top part?
Yeah, this whole top part. And then we've got two columns, right? We got here,
That's
and
another.
we've got here. Now, those are two columns, but if we want them side by side, and we know that we've been dealing with flex, and we know that we can handle how our columns operate, right? We can pretty easily say, okay, this is, you know, the Jane Doe portion is X width, and we can do margin to kind of educate. We can handle the education in the Jane Doe portion, and we can handle the two connection requests, the width of that. and its relation to the 500 plus connections.
Mhm.
If I want them side by side, what if I put them in a div? That now allows me to have a parent that I can put our flex properties on. And then within this div is column 1 and column 2. So let's go see if we have that.
Right.
If that makes sense. Does that make sense, Joshua?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, because we can, if it's in column 1, we can identify the margin. We can just use margin, right? To make these a distance. And we can do however much our column width is. We can handle all that. We just need, our big challenge in this one is, can we manipulate 2 columns and put them side by side using display flex? Or if you wanted to get, if you wanted to do something different, you could, do just like margin, but I would say use display flex, much easier. So you had the right idea. Where we've got a few things, right? You could even argue that if we go back to, let's go back to that image real fast. That you've got, so like your main page is your body, right? This whole thing is your body. You could have just a div that handles your navigation bar. And then you could have a div that is your container that contains all the information. You could do that as well. I think that'd probably be the easiest. Within the container, we would then have our div that we could call row. I think that's a good idea. And it contains these 2 columns, which is column 1 and column 2. And because we have this row div, we can identify and say, okay, we want them spaced however we want them spaced, whether that is, by pixels, justify space evenly, right? We just give a width to this dot row column. And then now, as long as the width is long enough to hold the width of this, plus the margin, plus the width of this, then it'll live in that parent. Look at chat.
So then the width of the overall parent would then be static? Like it would be a specific number?
You could, right? So you would have a container that was this whole thing that could be 100%, or it could be 980 pixels. Then you would have another div that is this whole thing that again could be a percentage of the parent, right? So we could say that this dot row, its width is, 60%. And then we could say margin, I'm just gonna put M for margin, is 0 pix auto. And that'll put it right in the middle, and it'll always take up 60%. You could do that. You could also say that, hey, this container is 980 pixels, and I want to create another thing internally that is our dot row, and this is only 640. And as long as, so if this was 640, and I'll just write that real quick, 640. As long as the width of this plus the margin plus the width of this, and obviously if you have margin around, you take all of that into account. From this point to this point, as long as it's within 640, even if it is 640 exactly, then they can line up side by side. If even this was 641, let's say that we were 1 pixel off, it would push this below. Not even below Jane Doe, it would push it below this entire column. Because it's saying the parent can't hold both children at the same time. Does that make sense, Elena?
Yes. I think that's where I was getting it mixed up. Thanks.
Yeah, of course. And that's usually what students, especially if you do with like the margin of each. So like if this has 10 and this has 10, then you remember that this middle is 20, right? If it's 10 like all around, it's going to take 10 on this side and 10 on this side to be 20. So that's where some students get confused. Like if this was 300 and this was, you know, I don't know, 330, which obviously that's not the same because this one's bigger, but, and then this was 20, that's going to give us 650, which is too big for our 640. So it would push this entire column below.
So it is really just like trial and error then in terms of finding the right margins that work for that page.
Yeah, and I
like
mean it's like,
displaying.
yeah, so it's trial and error, or it's also just kind of being attentive of, okay, my parent's 700. If this is 400, you know, if let's say the parent whole thing was 700, and this was, you know, when you're building this out, this is 400 and this is 270. Being like, okay, do I need margin here? I have enough space for 20. Okay, I could do margin 10 on each side, you know, 10 on the left, 10 on the right, and that's it. But this one would have margin right, 10, and this would have margin left, 10. And then it's like, okay, that still is 700. Or it's
Okay,
less than. So as long as it's less than, it'll fit.
got it.
That's
Thank you.
yeah, of course. All right, there's lots of stuff in the chat. Yeah, great question about limit how many containers. Not necessarily. I would say that container is like a word that I would use sparingly. Like I would have a container. And then do things like rows or columns or whatever you wanted to have in that case, if you wanted to have multiple. Okay, so with that information, what do we think as a group is our first step to problem solving this? The profile part looks awesome. Crush that nav bar.
Again, I think we need to move this div or column for COL over 1, maybe?
What do you mean by that?
Like, I don't know how to explain it. Like, make it a sibling of this column 2 instead of a sibling of the row.
Exactly. So all we have to do is find the end of this row. And maybe do control. Do you have a Windows? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Do Control Z. like twice. Okay, let's do this. This might be a little bit easier. Okay. So let's find where this ends. So it ends right here. So now we just take this end and then put it at the very end of this column. But let's actually real quick, sorry. Because I want to make sure, because what'll happen is if I scroll up a little bit. I'm trying to follow the path. Because it might have, and this is where, guys, this is where development can be so frustrating and you'll want to punch a something.
Yeah, I've wanted to punch
Yeah.
my screen.
Welcome to life, and you'll find like you move one element and then you fix everything and you're like, I hate this, but I also love it. So what I would do transparently, especially as you're looking, is I would say, okay, this is closed. Great. This is closed. Great. This is closed by this. Okay. And I would just start going back and forth. What does this close? This closes this. Okay. This closes this. Okay. So this is here.
Well, yeah, the class card, I mean, it's now closed the way it should be, I guess.
Yeah, that's what I was saying earlier. It doesn't have a closed div.
That's
Yeah,
what I'm
it's not,
thinking. That's what, because it doesn't, because that's what we're doing right now, right? Is we're saying, okay, this is closed by this.
okay.
This is closed by this. This closes this.
Is it 47?
This closes this, 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 this.
No, the
Li-
56,
line,
right?
So
where is line 47 is closed? Where is it closed?
it's closed
47, where
right,
is it closed? It should be closed
right here.
I mean,
That's a different one. 56 closes line 26, I believe.
Nope, because it goes, remember it's where it opens and then it's the first. So like this is open, this is closed. Cool. This is open. This is closed. So then the next close that it sees is this guy. So line 56 closes line 47.
That's
okay, yeah, I think we should move it to the right, I guess.
Tab it
The
to the right.
closing.
Yeah, maybe just for readability. Remember, it's not going to change the code, but yeah, for readability, I think that helps a lot. Perfect.
Then what about the other one with column 2?
So
That's missing a div.
so we've got,
Yeah.
again, yeah, see, this is the part of programming that's the worst because you're like, okay, column 2 is
They
open.
call this the div matching game.
Yeah. So we're coming here. We've got an open one here, closed. Okay, perfect. So we have 2 open so far. Maybe I'll put an O. Let's put dots. This is closed. This, we've got a close. This, we've closed this guy. So yeah, this is still open. So now we can say, okay, here to here. So maybe let's tab in 57. There
Yep.
we go. So now if I tab in 58 and we scroll up, that's my row. Cool. So
Yeah.
you didn't have any missing divs. It just was formatted in a way that it gets confusing. Okay. So again, we said that we want this to be my parent, right? That we want this to have both columns. So now all we have to do is let's take the div that closes that. And instead of closing before that column, so let's, cut, Control X. Perfect. And then I usually delete the line. Again, it doesn't, like, you just press delete until it goes up. Perfect. And then now let's go to the end of this, wherever this ends. We're assuming it's that. Let's go around that. So you have to go make sure it's encompassing that. And then now let's paste there. Okay. So now it at least, and we might have to play the div finding game for this second column, just to make sure that everything's all good to go. But now at least both columns are within the same parent. Okay. So let's say
Should I
that,
try refreshing and seeing if that worked?
sure, let's try it. Might want to refresh. There you go. Good job.
Oh,
Boom. So now all we have to do.
Yeah, indentation helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And usually prettier is better. I don't know why I didn't do it very well. That was pretty disappointing. But now all we'll have to do is like, okay, it looks like connection requests or this column itself. And this is where the CSS comes in, right? We have the format. We've said, okay, we know that we have a room here. That's okay. Now we've just got to level these out. Maybe this has some margin right here. Oh, sorry. Scroll up just a little bit. Like maybe there's some margin right here that this column doesn't have. Maybe we'll do, maybe we need this whole thing to be a little bit smaller, right? And now we just do, what does it look like? And we can change the sizing, but the format, the blueprint of our sort of web page is now fixed.
Right. I think I can get it from here.
Perfect. Does that help, Joshua? Did that
Yes, it did.
Okay.
I with copying and pasting from
Yeah, it's hard.
I think that messed up my divs and stuff.
Yep. That will
Um,
do it.
Oh, wait.
Yes.
We apply flex one for the big column, right? The column that is big, we apply flex one to it, right?
Depends. Yeah, I don't know what, Joshua, what did you, yeah, so you would think for a row, you would apply flex. That way the columns have some spacing in between. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now you could have had it to where they're both just inline block and then pushed, dealt with margin. You could have also done that. I think plotting your blocks does that exact thing. Where you
No,
just,
I did flex.
cool. Yeah. That's the way to do it. I would say definitely get comfortable with flex because it's dynamic, meaning that as we build out pages, if it changes, like that's kind of the way you would go. You would use other tools, like there's other libraries for CSS, like Tailwind or Bootstrap that you'll use, especially we'll do a walkthrough of Bootstrap for one of the classes because it'll be super duper helpful for you whenever you're building out like forms and stuff for your next class. And it's super easy to understand. But yes, I would say practice with flex, but you could do it either way.
All right, thank you.
Of course. Any other questions on that? Or else I'll pause the recording.
I get confused sometimes about having positioning absolute and all that. I get really confused about that very often. I don't know if you can show us any example of positioning, relative, absolute, and all that.
Yeah, I've had a couple of requests. So what I think I'll do is tomorrow before
Okay.
The profile or the mock belt exam, as I'll talk a little bit about it for like 15 minutes in office hours. So yeah, I will
Okay.
I just haven't put that. I got a couple of requests today about that. I haven't put together
Okay.
the material. And so I'll put together some material that way we can dive into that just a little bit.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I had like the same confusion, but I did it a little bit differently.
Sure.
Your way would have been quicker, like finding like I just like started over and made sure I had both of the rows next to each other.
Yeah.
Then I
Yeah.
started over quite a bit, but
Yeah. For this one, starting over is a-okay. I would say you probably
consuming.
will. Yeah, you're gonna get to where you're writing, tons of lines of code, and starting over would be, the worst. You would not want to do that. So, yep. Cool. All right, I'm gonna pause the recording.